Thank you. I will present you the access to treatment based on the essential medication list of palliative care. We're going to review two lists. One is the list of essential medications from WHO, and the other one is a list of essential medications included in the essential package recommended by the Lancet Commission report. So, the concept of essential medication is that there's a minimal list of medications for a basic health system, including the most efficient, safe, and cost-effective for priority conditions. Those three conditions: efficient, safe, and cost-effective. And for that, there needs to be evidence in those three in order to be included in the WHO list. I would like to see if you can raise your hand. From the countries that have list of essential medications, please raise your hand. If in countries you have a list. Very well. Almost all of them. Panama has a recent, brand new list in the world, the most recent one throughout the world. As I mentioned, essential medications are those basic medications that should be applied at all levels, instances, and all the healthcare. The list of medications satisfies the priority needs of the population and are selected, as I mentioned, based on their relevance in public health. The model list serves as a model for countries, but if there are things inside the list of medications that don't apply for the country, well, the country doesn't have to adopt them. Evidence of efficacy and safety, and that is indeed a very in-depth process before the expert committee in the list of essential medications will carry out their analysis. And comparative cost effectiveness, how is it that substance compare with other similar molecules or similar therapeutics with different prices? They must be available all the time, not sometimes yes, sometimes no. The adequate amounts to satisfy the needs or the demand in formulations and appropriate doses both for children and adults, with guaranteed quality and a price that the individual and the community can pay. We cannot include in this list because if you remember when there was this campaign of antiretrovirals, where the antiretrovirals were still under patent, and there were some groups that had been recognized as essential because we had the HIV/AIDS epidemics, but the treatments that were under patent and they could not enter to be sold as generic or a low price. And there was a proposed campaign from India where they were able to manufacture generic antiretrovirals despite the fact that there was still coverage. The United Nations considered that the priority need was health, so they would not consider the patent. The list should be flexible and adaptable to different situations. Each country must adopt their own list according to their epidemiological needs, but also according to their resources and the distribution. It has to be in all formulations and doses. We have a working track with essential medicines in palliative care. In the IAHPC developed a list for palliative care, and in 2013 WHO asked IAHPC if we could prepare a list of essential medication for palliative care that was based on the evidence following the criteria that I presented to you before. In that process, we developed the following steps. We identified the most common causes of mortality. We identified the most common and complex symptoms for those conditions with high mortality, and we also identified the appropriate medications to treat and control those symptoms, not the underlying condition. We only focus on the symptomatic treatment, and we're just talking about the physical part. and of course some psychological symptoms. The most common causes for mortality for 2008 were cardiac cancer, stroke, respiratory chronic disease, accidents, and diabetes. The most common and complex symptoms after analyzing the literature in PubMed and in different sources and database, we found that these were the most common and complex symptoms for those conditions of high mortality. On that basis, we developed a list that was submitted to WHO to be analyzed based on the evidence that we have collected. That effort was done with Tanya and Lucas Rabruk and a working group from IHPC, where we look for the evidence available in the literature for each one of those symptoms and what were the medications that will comply with their characteristics demanded by the WHO. This is a patient, I don't know if you've seen the report of Human Rights Watch in Mexico. Do you know that report? You can check it in Human Rights Watch. There's a report where they include a video. This is a patient who has a pancreatic cancer and lives 4 hours away from Incan, where she receives treatment. And she has to travel to see Dr. Allende. This patient that you see in the cover photo of the Lancet report, she goes with her daughter. She has to travel in a very limited transportation and 4 hours of bus to reach Incan. This is not as an essential medication. If it was that the case, this lady should not have to go through all this palliation treatment. These were the list of medications that we submitted to WHO, but there were 37 pages of references based on the different levels of evidence and all the literature that we found. This is available in the webpage of the IAHPC, and it's also found on a small book in Amazon that I think it costs $1 or so. Well, in summary, the level of evidence of efficacy and safety in medication used for palliative care is extremely limited. The strength of the evidence is determined by the capability of that medication that can be efficacious and safe in all instances, and is also cost effective. But when we look for the studies, we find that randomized controlled clinical trials in palliation care are very limited, scarce. First, because it is not ethical. Number two, patients die. So the possibility of publishing with that level of evidence is quite limited. But there's strong evidence on levels A, B for 4 medications: dexamethasone for anorexia, amitriptyline and fluoxetine for depression, and morphine for dyspnea and pain. There we have a very strong evidence that has no challenge. The other medication from the list that I showed you previously had levels C and D. Or is it weak, or it is an expert's consensus or an opinion of different experts that is rated as potential D. The 18th edition of the list of essential medications from WHO, in addition to medications, included a separate section that is called Section 2 for pain and palliative care, because previously they were included in cancer, and there was a paragraph that mentioned all the medications required to treat symptoms of that cancer are considered as essential. It's a very wide interpretation without any guidance. So when we told the expert committee and the WHO that the essential medications were not only for cancer, they accepted, and now we have a new section called the importance of Section 2. And it states as such. This is Section 2 called Medication for Pain and Palliative Care in the model list. These are the medications that stayed at the end after the analysis made by the expert committee of WHO, and these are the ones that will remain on the list. In 2007, the list is reviewed every 2 years. In 2017, she corrects herself. We selected these medications in red. They were added. So the list was updated with these new medications in red. And as analgesic, fentanyl and methadone. Methadone was something that, since the perspective of the palliative, we were working intensively for WHO to include. In methadone was only used for substitution treatment for dependency. This is the essential package in the Lancet report. As you see, very small. It's an abbreviated version of the WHO list, because in the Lancet, what we tried to do when we were working in cost to identify which were the medications, basic essential medications, that were also the most economic for countries of lowest resources. So this didn't mean more than 1% of their health expenditure. All the medications that are in this essential package of Lancet are included in the list of essential medications of WHO, but not all of them in the palliative care list. Some of them are not in the list of palliative care, almost all of them, but not everyone. And with the exception of petroleum jelly, that is not included in the list of essential medication of WHO. It's not considered a medication, and it's not present by this state as one of the medications for management of wounds and prevention of wounds. This is a table of an article that we published recently, where we did an analysis of the cost of medications in countries when there was medications under the patent with complex release systems, transdermal or sustained release, compared to morphine of immediate release, either oral or in vials. And we found that in some countries, those who were in this list, they all had morphine of immediate release included in the list of essential medications, but in all of them, the medications that are on the extreme right were cheaper than oral morphine, despite that there were systems of prolonged release or transdermal, which are much more expensive to manufacture. How can a vial be more expensive than a transdermal patch? Morphine, there's something wrong here. And from that group, these are the countries where that occurred. And I'll show you the prices. No, tomorrow I'll talk about price. But we were surprised to see that in some cases, with regards to the vials of morphine, they were extremely expensive. And finally, I want to show you a brief example of the Hospice Africa Uganda in Kampala, preparing morphine of immediate release that are distributed in other countries of palliative care. She's the pharmacist of the program. They import, with the authorization of the ministry, the morphine sulfate that they reconstituted, and they put it in these plastic bottles that, according to their color, have a different concentration. So this allows the nurse who has all these medications in their suitcase can visit the homes and provide and take these bottles to the patients. In each bottle, there is a mark with lines. In case the patient cannot read, has to shake the bottle and take up until this line, until this line, until this line. But that's one way of taking access to treatment of pain of patients, like the one in Mexico I presented you. Doesn't have to travel for hours to get the medication. Thank you.